Welcome back to Light the Fuse, the Mission Impossible podcast that will not go quietly. We're going to be louder and louder.
Yeah.
The loudest one of all is right here. Charles Hood, how you doing?
I'm feeling loud.
Good. Because we got another musical episode, that we got to bring them the sound. Do we have anything to take care of beforehand though? Usually you got a big old list.
Well, I mean, there's always fun stuff. People are always sending us good things. Somebody brought up on Twitter. His name is Rich on Twitter. I love his handle is @Joe_Hallenbeck. Of course, we always love those Last Boy Scout references. Big Tony Scott fans over here. So this guy Rich brought up something very interesting about MI3 that I think we need to talk about. Eddie Marsan plays that kind of henchman guy who originally was supposed to be him in the opening sequence. We found out if you listen to our making of episode, we dug into this stuff. Eddie Marsan was originally supposed to be the one who has a gun to Julia's head. It wasn't Philip Seymour Hoffman, and they reshot it with Philip Seymour Hoffman to give him more because, as we've talked about a lot, he's not in that movie enough. So thankfully they put him in that opening scene because that opening scene is incredible. However, Eddie Marsan's character, along with the henchman who kidnaps Julia, whatever happens to them in the movie?
Yeah, I mean, I had never thought about it until Joe brought this up. Had you?
No, I don't know if I ever noticed, and we haven't looked at the movie since he brought it up. Our response was, are we sure that Julia didn't shoot them, amidst all the henchmen getting shot in the climax of the movie? He seemed to think no. And I don't really remember that. They would have made a bigger deal, I would think, out of them getting shot, right? I mean, does anybody know? I mean, we need to pull up the movie again and maybe take a look, but I don't think both or even I don't think maybe even either of these guys gets their comeuppance at the end of this movie. So they're on the loose. Is what we're saying right now. You brought
up the point that, the rest of the MI team also is nowhere to be found in the final act of the movie. So,
yeah.
I don't know what that's about. Maybe they're all together somewhere on an island or something. Yeah.
Let's explore this in a CBS All Access show. Let's follow Luther and Zen and Declan. Let's see them. Let's see Ving Rhames and Maggie Q and Jonathan Rhys-Meyers come back, and they can chase down Eddie Marsan and that henchman. And, we can get a whole TV show about it. Maybe that's what was happening in the third act with the team.
Yeah.
Because that is, to me, a very big disappointing thing about MI3 is how the team just gets left behind for the third act. It's a bummer.
We've been pitching a lot of CBS All Access shows, though. So we got to maybe focus.
We're going to keep doing it until someone makes one.
We should be the one making them. That's the problem. But I don't think anybody cares.
I don't think anyone will let us make. We're gonna make them like with like stick figures. It'll be claymation or something.
Hey, I'm into that. I'm very into that. If this quarantine goes on any longer, we're gonna have to. But yeah.
Yeah. There was also somebody sent us. Drew Farmer sent us this total film clipping that compared the body counts of the first 5 movies, which I thought was kind of fun. Which movie of the first 5 movies do you think has the biggest body count?
I think 2. Am I right?
Yeah, 2's got 37.
Yeah.
What do you think's next? This doesn't
5?
include Fallout.
5?
Yes.
Okay.
26. That's got 26. What do you think's third?
Ghost Protocol?
MI3. MI3 with 23. Then Ghost Protocol with 16. Last place is the first Mission Impossible with 9.
Wow. Comparative restraint. And those 9, most of them are team members, so
Yeah.
It
was a lot for Ethan. Poor guy. But anyway, sorry for all my asides. We can talk about this Joe Kraemer interview now.
Okay, great. I'm excited to get back into it. I really loved talking to Joe. I thought he was very articulate, and we love talking to musicians. We love Lorne, obviously. He's our man. So getting to hear another perspective on the music of Mission Impossible was really fantastic.
Yeah, it's great to have our second composer now on the show, and of course we're gonna do our best. We're tracking down, trying to get Elfman and Hans Zimmer and Michael Giacchino. We're working on that, and so one by one we're gonna get all of them, and we're so happy that we got Joe Kraemer. So I think you'll all enjoy the interview, and for now enjoy Kevin Blumenfeld's The Plot theme. So the opera sequence, which is referencing The Man Who Knew Too Much, did you ever think, Bernard Herrmann is in The Man Who Knew Too Much, right? Is he connecting? Did you ever think that maybe you would do that, or?
The bottom line is no. I thought it would have been fun in the way of the gun to be a dead body, somebody that gets shot.
Are you a dead body in that?
No, I'm not in the movie.
Oh, you're not, okay.
I scored a TV show called Femme Fatales in the early 2010. It's like 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. And I thought it would be fun to be an extra on the show. They put me in and gave me lines, and I had a whole scene. And I had fun doing it, but I thought, I don't want to muddy the waters, you know. At that point, John Williams had never been in a Star Wars movie, So I just thought, I don't need to be in this movie. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'd reached a point where I sort of thought some of this meta stuff is just getting overdone. Like, I really am sick of the Wilhelm scream.
Right.
You know what I mean? I want it to just be erased and never put in a movie ever again. I'm so tired of it. I would sneak funny little Easter eggs into my scores, and then I just sort of, I guess, grew out of it, for lack of a better term. The closest I got was that there's a certain musical gesture that I used in an early film score that I sometimes sneak into a new film score in a very hidden way, just to amuse myself.
Right.
It's not as obvious as, say, McQuarrie's cameo in Rogue Nation or Hitchcock's cameos in his movies.
Right.
But no, I was never tempted. But in fact, part of it was that they had shot in Vienna already with an actor, and he had a big sort of Rasputin beard, and he had this very Viennese. He sort of had your beard a little bit,
Nice.
And it had this. He had this look that they were going for, and I'm not a rock star. I'm not I'm not a performer anymore. When I was in my 20s, I would get up and perform. Now I'm a composer and a conductor, and I'm suitably attired as such. And I had no desire to do it.
Do we know what McQuarrie's cameo is in Rogue Nation? What's his cameo in Rogue Nation?
He's in the shot where Rebecca Ilsa Faust is walking into the train station. He is sitting on a bench on the left side of the screen when it's like an overhead shot.
Oh, okay. Where they have her surrounded,
and then
or whatever.
I think and then when it cuts to a side shot of her walking, there's another shot where you can sort of see him.
Oh, okay.
Against the wall.
He's
He's also in Reacher.
Oh, where is he in Reacher?
When Cruz and Duvall are looking at security cam footage, he's in one of the 4 cameras.
Okay.
I don't think he's in Way of the Gun. And then, of course, we're in Suspects together at the very end, although he's in Suspects like 4 times.
Oh, you are? And you're both in Suspects?
Yeah, when Kevin Spacey gets out, straightens out his leg and gets in the car and drives away. Then Chaz runs out. And you see Chaz on the sidewalk going like, he got away. Yeah. You see the director's parents, his father and his stepmother, walking towards the camera. And then you see me, McQuarrie, who I'm like in regular clothes. McQuarrie's dressed as a cop. And McQuarrie's roommate at the time, because we were all broke and had roommates, was this guy, Randall Slavin, who's a big photographer now. And the 3 of us are like laughing in the middle of this shot. Kind of doesn't make any sense, but it's funny. And I always, I tried to get the director to let us come in and ADR some dialogue of like, I can't believe they didn't know it was it was verbal kint this whole time. It was obvious it was him. And then just bury it in the mix so that you could only hear it on headphones. But nobody has a sense of humor anymore, so they wouldn't let us do it.
Was there ever talk of you scoring Usual Suspects?
No.
Okay.
John Ottman had done Public Access for Bryan Singer before that, and he was already editing and scoring the film.
Okay, right.
I talked to him at once about maybe if he needed help, if I could work for him, but he had somebody already, and that was fine.
The score seems very indebted to the JFK score.
Well, the challenge Ottman always faces is that he cuts the movies that he scores for that director.
Mm-hmm.
Which is unheard of to me. I don't know of any other editor who also does the music.
Yeah. Well,
it's crazy.
And one of the reasons they don't is because the scheduling is a nightmare.
Yeah. I can't imagine how you would be able to do that.
And so, as an editor, John would tempt the movies with the best music he could find, and then the director would fall in love with that music, and then sort of pressure John as composer into giving that same feeling back.
Right.
There's a lot of, JFK, The Final Countdown, I think it's called. With I think Ken Wamberg did that score. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, John Scott. But I think it's Philadelphia Experiment, actually, which is, anyway. And then The Emperor's theme, you can hear that in there, too, because that was like Kaiser Soze's theme in the temp.
That's funny.
Yeah. Basic Instinct was in the temp, which had a lot of...
Oh, that's a great
The shimmer
score.
of that had a sort of influence on the main title.
Jared Goldsmith.
That had a lot to do with why there was no temp in McQuarrie's movies, because he was always on my case in a good way, pushing artistic integrity to not copy the temp.
Right.
And not only because of what he'd seen on Suspects or those movies, but also just in general, that he was tired of every movie sounding like, say, American Beauty. You know? And so
that was definitely the case back then. In the early 2000s, everything sounded like all commercials and everything too. Like, it was just... I wanted to go back to the A400 because the opening cue of the movie and on the soundtrack as well is so awesome, and it goes to so many different places and it incorporates both the plot theme and the main theme. I guess I don't really know what I'm going to say about it other than it's awesome, and that's so great. That weaving in both the plot and the main theme is really cool. I think Giacchino did that a little bit in Ghost Protocol as well, but you're the only two that had done it at that point.
Danny uses a quote from the plot in the very beginning of, in that sequence where like Tom is a Russian.
Yeah,
you hear a little.
He doesn't use quite the whole phrase.
Right, he just kind of goes dun 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 dun.
Yeah,
but
never in the same track. He never went from plot into the main theme ever.
Oh, I don't know if I don't, and I can't say for sure. Again, I haven't seen 4 since it came out.
I think Giacchino does it.
I don't doubt you, but I don't know.
But you do definitely. Obviously,
I can neither confirm nor deny.
But in A400, you clearly. I mean, it's all.
Well, again, for me, a pet peeve in contemporary film music in general is that film music really has a very limited vocabulary now. Almost every film composer is a rock star who didn't want to go on the road anymore. They're either a rock star who was famous and didn't want to go on the road anymore, or they're a rock star who never made it and is therefore scoring movies. So their musical vocabulary comes from rock music. And they use the orchestra like a rock band. So the strings are like the rhythm guitar. The horns are the lead singer, and every percussion instrument they can find is all playing at the same time to make the percussion section. And I grew up with Williams and Goldsmith and Elmer Bernstein, and that to me is great film music. And I worry that it's a dying skill set. Also, the language not only comes from classical music, but if you really sit down and study John Williams' scoring, even for like something like Star Wars, which obviously has the trappings of like Erich Wolfgang Korngold or Wagner or, some of the English composers, a lot of the actual chords that he's using, they're jazz. And a lot of the way he thinks is like a jazz musician, both in terms of solos, in terms of arranging. If you listen to Princess Leia's theme on the original Star Wars album, it's got like the tune, and then the tune again, and then a flute solo, and then we wrap the tune up and we get out, And that's like almost like a jazz chart. And in conjunction with that is we have this we're in this period right now where all these franchises are making comebacks, from Star Wars to Jurassic Park to Superman to Batman, Ghostbusters, everything that was Jumanji, everything that was something is coming back. And there were certain films where young composers or new composers were trying to use themes from the older franchises, from the original versions, and they just didn't have the same skill set to make it fit with their score. So it sounded like new score, new score, new score, almost then like they got the CD of the soundtrack from the original score and just put that in the movie, and then back to the new composer. And that drove me nuts. And I wanted to make a score where you, for better or worse, where you couldn't tell where I ended and Lalo began, so that you weren't going, oh, it's Joe Kraemer, Joe Kraemer, Joe Kraemer, Lalo Schifrin, Joe Kraemer, Joe Kraemer, Joe Kraemer. And I wanted, for the audience, I wanted it to be transparent from beginning to end. And for better or worse, I do think that's kind of what I accomplished. The downside was, like, for example, the Academy said your score is ineligible for any kind of consideration on any level because it's we consider it an adaptation of Lalo Schifrin and there's nothing original about it. Or we're afraid that people won't be able to tell what you wrote and what Lalo wrote, which is sort of a backhanded compliment, but it's also kind of insulting. You know?
Right.
The biggest disappointment in that being that because they said that, there was then Paramount had no interest in promoting the score on any level because it wasn't going to win any awards. You know, I never thought I would win an award. It's the 5th movie in an action franchise. How often do they win Oscars? You know what I mean? Even to cap a 60-year career scoring movies, John Williams doesn't get the Oscar for Skywalker, you know?
Right.
So I embraced not only quoting Schifrin, but giving myself permission to pretend I wrote those themes and could do whatever I want with them, and then using them like a composer would use those themes.
Right.
You know, we don't sit around and go, oh, wow, that cue has Rey's theme and Yoda's theme and Kylo Ren's theme. You just do it.
Yeah.
And that's what I gave myself the freedom to do that for Mission. And, you know, again, maybe it wasn't the best move career-wise. Maybe I would have been better doing John Williams' move and saying, I don't want to use any of the themes. But, you know, I wanted the movie to be good and I wanted the score to be good. And I feel like I did something no one else has done, which is that I made, at the risk of sounding arrogant, which I apologize for, I made a score that it sounds like what it's quoting without ever feeling like the quotes are just needle drops from the original material.
I think that definitely comes across.
For better or worse.
I think the movie is better for it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So like with the A400, what's interesting is that opening from the very beginning of the Paramount logo to Tom walking into the record store is sort of every piece of the entire film score from then on is there except for Solomon Lane's theme.
Right. So sort of your overture.
Yeah, you get, you know, because part and parcel of the decision to use only instruments that Lalo could have used when he did the pilot, part and parcel of that was that there was this underwater sequence in this high-tech environment. Now, they did shoot it underwater. You know, Tom really did have to hold his breath to get these shots. And during his training, he really did hold his breath for however many minutes it was. I don't know, 100 minutes or something. I don't know.
I think it was 6 or something. It was
I
crazy.
between you and me, I don't know what crazy stunt he's going to do in 7, because the way things are going, he's going to have to cut off his own head and sew it back on to outdo himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's crazy. The guy will do anything. It's impressive, if not terrifying. The Taurus sequence, the underwater sequence, it was the one sequence where I felt like this decision to not use any synthesizers might come back and bite me in the rear. So one of the benefits of having a slightly longer window of composing on this movie than most Hollywood composers get, my long-standing relationship with the director at that time got me in the movie early and then allowed me time to work on it while he was still finishing the back half of the movie. I remembered some, not classical music, but what we call classical music, concert hall music, art music by a minimalist composer named Stephen Reich. And this piece in particular that I was thinking of had a very synthesized texture. He used nothing but acoustic instruments, but he used them in a way that created a sound, a feeling that you would get with synthesizers in the late 70s. And so I thought that might be an interesting technique to look at how he did that and then see if there's anything I can learn from that for the Taurus sequence. And so I ended up writing all this music for the Taurus sequence, which became one of the director's favorite things I brought to the film, to the point where then at one point it was all over the movie. And then we started pulling it out and putting other stuff in. But that opening with the logos, the Paramount logo, the Skydance logo, the I think it's Alibaba, and then the Bad Robot. That sequence was because of the Taurus music sequence. And then in the final film, the piece that inspired that whole texture ended up being pulled out of the movie in favor of this sort of Kubrickian hearing his breathing sound design approach instead. Which for me is like when they took the narration out of Blade Runner. I still hear the narration whether it's there or not. Right. And similarly, because I'm the only one who feels that way. And it's not a problem, but it's interesting for me because I watch it and go, where'd the music go? But because I never saw it. I always saw it with the music for so long. You know what I mean?
Obviously, if you have any Tom Cruise stories, everyone who listens to the show loves Tom Cruise.
I know that Tom is a huge fan of Mission Impossible. I mean, he sort of considers himself in a weird way the protector of the franchise.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that. He never said that to me, but based on what I've seen, I know that he has he really likes his working relationship with the writer-director. And, hence 4 movies that I think they're going to do in a row.
Yeah.
4 Mission movies in a row. I always felt like what Tom wanted out of the score, and what I wanted out of the score were very much in sync. It was made clear by Tom wearing his producer hat that this is a Mission Impossible movie. When somebody does a stunt, you hear the Mission Impossible theme. And when there's an action sequence, there's music. And if there's 1 or 2 action sequences where we feature the sound effects and don't have score, maybe 1 or 2, but we can't do the whole movie where there's never music in the action sequences. Coming from a world of Raiders of the Lost Ark and Star Wars and Superman, I'd been dying to do that.
Yeah.
And there had been situations where I was trying to do that on other movies and it was denied. And on this one, it was being requested by Tom. So being a Mission Impossible movie and being part of a franchise that Tom is the curator of, what he wants goes.
Right.
And I was excited to do music that he was looking for with the hope that he would hear it and it would stay in the film.
Right. And I think that everybody we talk to that works with him, that you kind of have to up your game to kind of like be on his level too.
Well, and that's just it. And I felt up to the challenge. Again, for me, I never set out to be retro. I never set out to be like iconoclastic, like to go against the stream, if I'm using that word correctly, to buck the trend. That being said, and I hope I don't hurt his feelings, I'm not a fan of the Zimmer approach. I'm not a fan of that sound, of that rock and roll, heavy drums, quote, epic sound.
Okay.
Now, from what I can tell, Hans is not busting down my door because he's such a fan of my music either. And I don't take that personally. You know what I mean? It takes all, again, I'm not trying to be mean to anybody. Look, I like what I like. People like what they like. Right. I like John Williams. I like that classic style. The result, though, is that it sort of sets me apart from most of the other people. I know Michael, for example, is a big John Williams kind of fan. And to a lot of people, he's sort of the heir apparent of the Williams mantle.
Yeah.
As the big orchestral composer. Desplat tends to be more orchestral. Desplat.
Yeah, we've talked about this on the show too. Like we're a fan of that kind of melodic feeling.
Yes.
It's just sort of. I think the Dark Knight score is great, but I think that what it has caused has sort of changed film music in a lot of ways for the worse. And I've said that on the show before. That I feel that way. That a lot of scores that try to imitate that and don't. It just doesn't really. I miss that element to scores as well.
And it's also nice to have each movie sound so differently. Even Michael's movies sound very different, I think, from one another.
I think how do I put? I think the prequels sound different than the original scores to Star Wars.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's because I'm such a nerd. I see the forest. I see the trees. You know what I mean? I don't just look at the forest. To my mom, it's all the same.
Right.
Just to use her as an example.
Yeah.
Standing back, to me, like 1 and 2 and 3 are all totally different from each other. To me, 4. The score to 4 feels like a companion to 3.
Right.
Not like he's repeating himself. I'm not knocking it, but they feel like the same mind. Mm-hmm. And then I feel like a new approach. I think it was a totally valid intention to make every movie sound different. I'm disappointed that it was perhaps assumed that I can only do one thing.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I think if you go back and look at the work I've done over my career, I've done synth scores, I've done rock scores, I've done classical, orchestral, symphonic scores. It would have been really fun to say, okay, I did that. Let's do something completely different now.
Right.
But, didn't happen.
Right.
Whatevs.
I wanted to compliment you on. I love your use of timpani in scores. I think if I'm saying that right, like you're just a few.
It's
cues
just funny.
In Way of the Gun, the timpanis. There's these cues that have really like a very distinct. Like it sort of feels like everything else drops out and just goes to the as if I'm.
No, you're right. It's like
correct,
the kettle drum. It's the timpani.
I love that.
I love that stuff. I laughed because during the process of Mission, at one point near the end, I was told, somebody told me they developed an allergy to the timpani, and so I was sort of forbidden from using it for the rest of the score. So it was funny that it ends up being one of your favorite things. I think
it's still in there in Rogue Nation though too.
Well, because we couldn't re-record the whole score 2 weeks before the movie was over, even though I was sort of yelled at that that's what somebody wanted to have happen.
Wow.
Fun.
No. Look, making movies is tough. I mean, it's hard.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not trying to vilify. I mean, I you can't see this listening, but I'm laughing as I say this stuff.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And it probably sounds like I'm more bitter than I am. You know, I'm not bitter at all. I'm incredibly bitter. I'm not bitter at all. No. But it's tough, and there's a lot of money on the line, and everybody's afraid they're never going to work again.
Yeah.
You know, I was terrified that if I screwed this up, I'd never work again. I didn't want to get fired. You know, I was afraid if I got fired, I'd be the guy who got fired at his first at-bat in the World Series. You know, I also didn't want to make a score that I hated.
Yeah.
I wanted to make a score that I was proud of. I knew that I felt like there was a dissonance between what one half of the production team wanted and what the other half of the production team wanted. I was trying to bridge that gap. I was trying to deal with contradictory notes from the same person. I want that wall blue. And I would say, okay. And then they'd go, why is that wall blue? I said, I want it orange. And then I don't want an orange wall. Make it blue. And then I make it blue. And they go, see, I told you it should be blue. You know,
right.
I was like, it was just tough. And that wasn't any one person all the time. It was different. When you're a composer on a movie, everybody has an opinion about music, from the director to the producer to the studio exec to the advertising people to the nanny of the director's kids to, you know, the editor, assistant editor. Everybody has an opinion. The orchestrator, and you're getting this from everybody. Oh, I love that. And the other person, I hate that. Get rid of that. You're going, and at a certain point, you have to kind of listen to your own instincts. And then, you know, you have to sort of look at the lay of the land and go, well, who's going to get me fired here? They're who I have to make happy.
Right.
You know? And if making them happy means I don't get hired on the next one,
right.
You know, it was more important to me, for better or worse, to make it to the finish line of 5 than to get fired in the hope of protecting a relationship that might get me on another movie.
Okay. Well, I mean, is it time for the most important questions of the day?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry,
Well,
sorry for keeping you long.
Dude, as you can tell, I'm very upset about it.
We ask everybody, this is hugely important, to rank their favorite Tom Cruise hairstyles throughout the series. We've kind of been boiling it down to, like, are you a short hair guy? Are you a long hair guy? So if we could get your input on that, that would be hugely helpful to us.
I think 2 has aged the worst.
Right.
Okay.
I think as a film, every aspect of 2 is the most dated.
But we're just talking haircut right now.
But I'm saying even the haircut.
Okay.
I think what's funny is I look at 1 and he looks so different to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like the guy who's in the other 4 movies to me.
Well, we like that because we think he's just come out of, like, the military. Maybe he's still in that kind of mode.
Yeah.
But are you a short hair guy then?
I liked his look in 5.
Okay.
I mean, it's hard for me to be.
You've seen 5 more than
I've seen 1 twice,
Okay.
2, 3, and 4 once, and 5 a quintillion times.
Right.
So, you know.
Right.
Okay. He's got kind of longer hair in Ghost Protocol.
Right.
I don't know if you remember
Great
that.
cut, though.
I mean, I would just have to say 5 is the one I'm most familiar with. I liked his look
And you
in
like
5.
that? Okay.
And I
Skirt
really
medium.
I liked his look in the leather coat in the garage when he's talking to Solomon Lane on the phone. Like, I liked that. I thought that was a cool, like, Ethan Hunt look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and he looks good in a tux. I can't argue with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Listen, he's a handsome guy. Any way you cut it. You know. So now we want your movie rankings. I mean, I know you've only seen some of them once. Best to worst, worst to best, whatever you want to do.
I can't.
Or top 3.
I don't want to be disingenuous.
Right.
And it's not like, oh, all my kids are.
Right.
I love all my kids. No, I like some of my kids more than my others.
Right.
No. But I mean, 5 is both my favorite and the one I hate, and I haven't seen 6.
Oh, really?
No. Well, I mean, why would I go to my ex-girlfriend's wedding?
Right.
You know.
Right.
5 is both my favorite and my least favorite. Its familiarity is I have a nostalgia for that period. I have a fondness for the material that I created and worked on, but I don't ever need to see it again because
You've seen it so many times.
Seen it so many times, and to a degree, and to a similar vein, I don't necessarily feel compelled to go back and watch the first 4 ever again now. As a result, again, it's not that I'm not a fan. You know, I spent back in 1999. I worked on The Simpsons for half a season as a sound effects editor, and that was 21 years ago now, and I haven't been able to watch The Simpsons since. When you work on something, it has a tendency to take what was fun out of it and make it a job.
Right.
And, I don't know how often, once you cut and post a podcast, how often do you go back and listen to them? Maybe you do a lot. I don't know. Like with my albums.
I just make sure that it sounds all right.
Right.
And then I'm not listening again.
Yeah, I haven't listened to the music from Mission. Outside of the bits that I use when I teach classes or do presentations, I haven't sat and listened to it since I sort of archived it all in 2015. The drive over here was the first time I'd really listened to it in a sort of linear fashion since 2015. It's not what you do it and you make it the best you can do, and then you move on and you try to make the next thing you do even better.
Right.
So,
well, we appreciate you both listening to your score again and coming onto this podcast.
It's my pleasure.
It was a real thrill. You were on the top of our list of people to get from the moment we started this podcast. So this has been a huge thrill.
And there have been a lot of fans out there who've been asking. They're like,
great.
when are you gonna get Joe Kraemer? We're big fans of the score, so
Well, thank you very much. It was very gratifying to see, how many fans liked the score and how many fans were hoping maybe, I'd get a shot at another one, and maybe someday I will. And I say that completely with no knowledge whatsoever. Mm-hmm. In a way, what I'd love is for them to make a TV show again and to work on that.
We'd love that.
Because what I would love is for them to be able to do smaller stories and not have them centered around stunts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now they have CBS All Access. As we keep talking about this.
Well, and there's a new Viacom.
Well, because CBS and Paramount are back together again under the Viacom umbrella, which that's
why we're hoping that maybe they give Maggie Q a show or Paula Patton or
if
the
they
two of them
hadn't killed
together.
off Alec Baldwin, to me that would have been the great hook. But I haven't seen the film, but I heard they killed off Baldwin.
But
in six,
you could do a prequel series. You could do
right, because he looks younger.
Hey, there's Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah,
Lawrence Fishburne could do it. He's in 3.
Right. Oh, who's in the? It's Angela Bassett's in the new one. Does she take over for Baldwin? Is that what?
No, she's CIA.
Oh, okay.
She's just separate.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
But Lawrence Fishburne was part of the IMF. He could.
Yeah,
do
he
it
was
with Paula Patton and Maggie Q.
We want kind of a workplace.
Well, I mean, to me, it's like I want to see. Back to the themes for a second. We talked about when we were making the show, when we were making the score for 5, one of the things was that for Ethan Hunt, Mission Impossible is the big Lalo Schifrin theme. It's hanging off of airplanes. It's jumping out of buildings. It's riding a motorcycle at 100 miles an hour without a helmet through the desert. For Benji, it's being stuck in a tiny little closet watching everything on closed circuit monitors.
Right.
And that was the plot theme. It's just a few little notes that are very close together, whereas the Mission Impossible theme is a big orchestra spread out. Well, I think it'd be interesting to see a TV show about the Benjis of the IMF.
Right.
And then the movies are free to do the big stunt spectacle thing. You know? Sort of like that show, The Clone Wars, where they could do a whole episode that was nothing but R2-D2 beeping and booping and doing what he does. You can't take a half an hour in a movie and do that.
No.
Right.
But it was fascinating to do it with an episode of a TV show.
Yes, we would love. This franchise is so untapped. It's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for accepting this mission.
Me.
Yeah.
I will say I'm tired. I'm done with the mission. If you choose to accept it, you don't know how many emails a day I get. Like, Mr. Kraemer, it's all in good fun. I love it.
And we're back. We're back, and we're saying goodbye, for the time being, to Joe Kraemer.
It was cool to hear him talk about, he's very particular about film music. He has a very, he has his taste, like he said, and he talks about the modern scoring styles versus the style he likes, and how he worries that it's a dying art, the older approach to film scores. And I mean, for me, I love all the different styles. Of course, we've talked about, we love all the different approaches to the Mission theme, but even outside of that, just like the Trent Reznor and Atticus Rosses of the world and the Cliff Martinez's of the world, we love those kind of scores. There's a place for them for sure, but I also, I worry that is that old school, like he says, Giacchino a lot of people think Giacchino's sort of carrying the torch or whatever for that kind of music. So thankfully we have that happening, and Joe Kraemer obviously is doing that as well.
Yeah, there is like we've talked about for the 2 episodes, there's something very classic about his approach to Mission Impossible and his approach to film music in general. And me and my wife just watched Jack Reacher recently, and his score for that is so great and big and kind of, it is unlike many scores that you'll hear today, whether that's because of budget or, style or taste or whatever. But it was really interesting to hear that he always wants to do big scores that are also very melodic, which sometimes, even a big score will sometimes be atonal or just sort of moody. And I really love his commitment to that bigness and that sort of musicality that he always seems committed to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a totally different style. I mean, you look at something like Mad Max Fury Road, and the music in that movie is so relentless and so percussion heavy. Can you imagine having something on it that was a more Indiana Jones type sound? I mean, it changes the movie.
Right.
And I don't know. In the case of that movie, I don't think it would be for the better. It just depends on the movie, I think. I don't know. Yeah, it's a weird thing, and I really do hope that style of music doesn't go away. So I hope that there will still be movies that are done that way. And everything kind of goes in trends, and so maybe it'll swing back that way at some point.
Charles, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you where movie music is going to go. But you know what I can tell you? I can tell you that it's a great idea to join our Patreon.
Oh, yes.
I can tell you that right off the bat.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm saying go to patreon.com/LightTheFuse, sign up. If you don't want to do that, you can get a t-shirt on TeePublic if you want, or a sticker or a pin or a mask or a baby onesie. I hope that you're going to frame Madison's baby onesie now that she's already grown out of it.
I know. Well, hopefully we'll have another kid at some point and that kid can wear it.
Right.
But for now, I'll put it in a frame. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And you can just tell people that you love the show. You can tell your friends. We would love that. It would be huge.
Yes, and write reviews for us wherever you listen. Just spread the word. And the Patreon is patreon.com/LightTheFuse. There's so many perks. You can sign up at the bonus level for $5.95 a month. Just sign up for 1 month. It's $6. And then, you can listen to all of our bonus episodes. We have so many bonus episodes. It's insane. Bonus interviews, commentaries for all the 6 movies. We're doing really fun stuff. Every week we're releasing something new for our Patreon followers, including previews of upcoming interviews that we have and stuff like that. So it's really worth signing up for. Highly recommend you do that. And with the Patreon in mind, we need to give a special thank you to Jacob from Holland.
And I just want to remind everybody that this episode is brought to you by Jeremy Dillon, John B., and Real Estate Interest LLC, commercial real estate for growing companies. So we cannot thank all of these people enough. Thank you so much. You're keeping the show on the air. And do we know what's next week, Charles?
We do, don't we? What is next week? Give me a second. We have so many interviews, it's hard to keep track. I've got to look at our little log here. I don't want to speak out of turn and say the wrong name. Next week, we've got Roger Guyette.
Oh!
And
we loved
talking to Roger. He was so awesome. And he also got us someone else down the line who you'll be very excited about, which we'll get to. But for now, Roger Guyette was the visual effects supervisor for MI3. He's also done, Star Wars movies and things? What else has Roger done?
Yeah, I mean, whatever. Star Wars, whatever. Whatever. Star Trek, I think we talked to him about the first Star Trek, 2009 Star Trek.
I think maybe Pirates of the Caribbean as well?
Pirates? Yeah, maybe. He's a genius, and he has the best stories, and he's so funny. It's just great. I mean, we have been really lucky to talk to some of the best visual effects people, literally legendary people in the business. And
I remember I asked
him
about Alfonso Cuarón, because he has a great story about Cuarón and working on Prisoner of Azkaban, the 3rd Harry Potter movie.
Great.
That's a good one.
Every story he has is great. It's really fun.
Yeah, he's really funny too. It's a really great interview. Cannot wait to share that with you. You're going to love it.
Yeah. So, the hits keep on coming. I cannot stress to you how many amazing interviews we have coming up. The floodgates have opened, and we have got the best content for you guys. So keep coming back and keep supporting us any way you can, and we'll be back next week.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. And before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod and email us questions or comments at lightthefusepodcasts@gmail.com. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.